Have you seen Speak No Evil? It's a 2022 horror thriller about a Danish family who visits a Dutch family they met on holiday. An idyllic holiday takes a turn as the Danes try to stay polite in the face of unpleasantness. The film begins with the contrasting foreboding music as Bjorn, Louise, and their daughter Agnes are on a beautiful summer holiday by the pool in Tuscany. A man approaches Bjorn, asking him if he can use the deck chair next to him. Bjorn hesitates for a second before moving Agnes' belongings and saying sure with a smile. At a communal dinner at the resort that evening, the man from earlier makes a toast greeting all holiday goers. Bjorn watches on with a smile. Later that night, Bjorn can't sleep and walks over to the balcony of his room. He catches a glimpse of the man again, staring at him from a gate. When he looks back again, the man is gone. The next day while walking around, Agnes loses her toy bunny, Ninus, so Bjorn goes to look for it with a huff. He finds it and returns to find Louise talking to the man and his family. They introduce themselves as Patrick and Karen. Louise then tries to ask their little boy for his name, but he doesn't respond. Patrick explains that his son has trouble speaking, as he feels a little insecure sometimes. Karen then asks Agnes about her bunny, and Louise explains that Bjorn went to go find it. Patrick calls him heroic for doing that, which surprises Bjorn and makes him laugh. The two families have lunch and dinner together, where Louise tells them that she is a vegetarian, and Patrick says he's a doctor. They bond and converse about the similarities of their cultures. After returning home from the holiday, the Danes find a photo postcard of the two families from the Dutch, inviting them over for a weekend at their home. A few days later, after a school play, the couple have some friends over for dinner and tell them about the invitation. They decide it would be rude not to go. What's the worst that could happen? Right? So the Danes take a ferry and drive the rest of the way, arriving at Patrick and Karen's house deep in the wilderness. They welcome them warmly with food prepared and give them a tour of the house. There's a small problem with the sleeping area, for Agnes being a tiny mattress on the floor in Abel's room. Not wanting to be impolite, Louise smiles and tells Agnes that they'll figure something out. At dinner, Patrick insists that Louise try some of his roast boar. She reluctantly takes a small bite, saying it is delicious. Afterwards, Bjorn helps to take out the trash and takes a look at the shed outside when he is surprised by Abel standing behind him. The boy opens his mouth to reveal that he has no tongue. Bjorn is a little freaked out, but Patrick calls the boy back in. Back inside, the couples have a chat about the modern technology has made people not be able to find their way through life. They can hear Abel moaning upstairs, and Louise asks if he is alright. Karen says it's because of his disease, and he will fall asleep soon. Patrick explains that Abel has congenital glossia, which means he was born with a very short tongue. The next day, the two families take a walk. Agnes goes to play on a slide, but Abel is sitting on the bottom of it and doesn't respond to Louise when she nicely asks him to move. Patrick walks over and aggressively pulls the boy up, telling him to apologize to Agnes. Bjorn tries to say that it's not a problem, but decides to let Patrick discipline Abel. Back at the house, Louise discreetly tells Bjorn that she doesn't think she likes being here, and doesn't find the Dutch very pleasant to be around. Bjorn asks why, but then Karen interrupts them by inviting them to dinner that night. After Karen leaves, Bjorn sarcastically asks Louise if she still thinks they are unpleasant. That evening, just when they're about to leave, a man arrives at the house. Karen tells him that he is Muhajid, the babysitter, adding that he is the best, and cheap too. Louise, unaware that they are going without the kids, is obviously uncomfortable with this, but after seeing how Muhajid makes Agnes laugh with a magic trick, she again doesn't voice her concerns. After a long drive through the woods, they arrive at a restaurant. At dinner, Patrick suggests he order for them as the Danes can't read the menu. Louise reminds him that she is a vegetarian. He corrects her by saying that she eats fish, so she is a pescatarian, not a vegetarian, adding that the fishing industry is also bad for the environment. Bjorn smiles at the awkward exchange. The couples have quite a few drinks with dinner, and the Dutch get up to dance to the music. The Danes smile and watch until they finally decide to join them. They stiffly try to dance, but they feel uncomfortable as the Dutch get quite intimate. When it is time to pay the bill, Patrick comments that someone had a really good time tonight. Bjorn politely offers to chip in, but when the card reader is placed on the bar, Patrick doesn't move. So Bjorn asks, "So dinner is on us?" To which Patrick takes as a statement, saying that's so kind. Thanks, man. Next, Patrick drives drunk and turns on a very loud rock music in the car. Bjorn smiles at first, but Louise asks him if he can ask Patrick to turn down the music. Bjorn does so, but when Patrick ignores him, Louise, not being able to take it anymore, shouts, "Turn down the fucking music!" Karen gets Patrick to turn it down, saying that Patrick is very drunk and they both apologize. But then Patrick turns the music back on, while laughing, eventually compromising by turning it down a little. Back at the house, Louise sighs a breath of relief to see the kids sleeping soundly. She goes for a shower, but then freezes when she hears Patrick come in and brush his teeth. Louise returns to their bedroom and finds comfort in Bjorn's embrace. They start to have sex, but suddenly hear Agnes calling for them outside the door. They decide to ignore her and keep having sex. Afterwards, Louise goes to look for Agnes, who isn't in Abel's room, so she sneaks into the Dutch's room to find her daughter asleep in the bed with a naked couple. She picks her daughter up, wakes Bjorn up, and tells him she wants to leave immediately. They sneak out of the house, but down the road, Agnes can't find her bunny again. Louise tells her to let it go, but Bjorn, hearing her daughter cry, decides to go back for it. He asks them to wait outside while he goes to get it. Moments later, Agnes finds the bunny under the car seat, so Louise heads inside to tell Bjorn. She finds the two men in an uncomfortable conversation, where Patrick is asking why they are leaving without saying bye. Bjorn continues to try to be polite, making excuses about the small beds and how Agnes is uncomfortable. However, Louise then takes over explaining all the uncomfortable situations, with the last straw being finding her daughter in their bed when they are naked. Karen diplomatically explains all the situations and asks where Louise was when Agnes was crying for her. With a smile, Patrick convinces them to stay and asks the Danes to give them another chance for a great day. The women do some gardening while the men go to get groceries. In the car, the men talk about music, and the conversation gets a bit deeper, with Patrick saying there is a wild thing inside him that he likes. Bjorn agrees and gets emotional, confessing that he sometimes feels like he isn't the man he's supposed to be. Patrick then takes Bjorn to a big sand pit where they scream like animals. The men return home in high spirits, jumping into a pool with beers, as the women watch on laughing. While preparing for lunch, Louise accidentally cuts her finger. Bjorn asks Patrick to take a look as he is a doctor. Patrick replies he isn't a doctor, and Karen says he lies about that as he sometimes feels insecure. The Danes are a bit surprised and ask what Patrick does, to which he says, "Nothing. I don't believe in work." Louise is distracted by her finger but notices Karen telling Agnes to set the table and sternly correcting her when the cutlery is placed incorrectly. During the meal, Patrick rants on about Dutch cheese, but when Karen continues to tell Agnes what to do, Louise can't take it anymore and says, "Stop telling my daughter what to do." After an awkward lunch, the kids perform a dance for the adults, but Abel is unable to keep up with Agnes, which causes Patrick to stop the music and criticize him for his lack of rhythm. The Danes try to comment that it's alright, they're just having fun, Abel attempts to dance a few more times but is unable to satisfy Patrick. This escalates to the point Patrick throws his mug, which leads to Bjorn standing up and trying to defend the kids, saying it isn't right. Louise storms outside to calm down. The Danes ridiculously still decide to stay the night. When Bjorn is brushing his teeth, Patrick comes in and literally and figuratively takes the piss. He then winks at him in the mirror before leaving. While his wife and child sleep next to him, Bjorn is woken up by Abel's moaning and sees Patrick storm to his room while shouting. Later on, she is woken again by a loud TV and goes to turn it off. He also sees a tap left on and turns that off too, but then notices that the shed outside has its lights on. He goes to investigate and sees multiple suitcases and cameras in the first room. He goes deeper into the shed to find the walls covered with photos just like their postcard, where the Dutch are with other families on holiday. He slowly notices that in each picture they have a different child. One photo shows Abel with a different family before. Bjorn cautiously exits the shed, but then turns the corner to find that Abel's floating face down in the pool. Without explaining anything, he wakes his family up, gets them in the car, and drives off. On the road, he keeps looking back, is freaked out by a fast car, and makes a turn on a dirt road, which leads to his car being stuck. There is obviously no signal, so Bjorn asks the family to wait in the car while he runs to a house in the distance to get help. All the while, Patrick is watching from his car and heads over to Louise and Agnes. Bjorn crosses a stream to get to the house, but fails to get any help, and returns to the car to find his family gone. He cries while holding the bunny, but then sees a car approaching. Patrick gets out, and Bjorn pleads for him not to hurt his family. Patrick tells Bjorn to relax, and if they do what he says, it will be fine. In the car, Louise thanks Karen for answering her call and helping them. They drive off, with Louise and Agnes still unaware of the situation. After a while, Patrick stops the car and takes another piss in the bushes. Bjorn stares at the key still in the ignition, but doesn't act. They set off again. Agnes tells her mother that she wants to go home and is scared, and Louise comforts her, asking if they will be there soon. Patrick ignores them, but when Agnes asks again, he tells her to be quiet. Louise says, "Excuse me?" and Bjorn tells her to do what they say. They keep driving along until they meet with another car shining its headlights at them. Muhajid exits the other vehicle, and Bjorn stares at Patrick in fear. In the back, Agnes is getting more scared, and Louise tries to comfort her while asking what's going on. Patrick replies, "Shut the fuck up." Bjorn says, "Don't talk to my family like that," but is answered by a punch from Patrick. Louise tries to exit the vehicle, but the door is locked. Then Muhajid comes to open the door and starts choking Louise. Bjorn tries to put up a fight, but is pummeled by Patrick. While the parents are incapacitated, Patrick and Karen opens Agnes' mouth and cut off her tongue, which causes Louise to scream and Bjorn to puke. Muhajid then drags Agnes away, while slamming the door shut, with Louise banging on it. Louise is hysterical in the car, and Bjorn is in shock as Patrick starts driving again. They arrive back at the sandpit and exit the vehicle. Bjorn whimpers, "Why are you doing this?" And Patrick replies, "Because you let me," and then orders them to take off their clothes. They obediently do so, walk down into the pit, and embrace each other. In tears, Bjorn apologizes to Louise, but then a rock hits her in the side of her head, once and then twice, as she collapses onto the floor. Bjorn tries to drag her away, but is hit by a rock himself. They are then both gradually stoned to death. We are then taken back to sunny Italy, where the Dutch are driving, and we see Agnes sitting in the back seat. Now you've seen it, please like and subscribe. And remember, kids, if some psychopaths are cutting your daughter's tongue off, you should probably do something.